Hi guys. So we'll finish up our Aristotle lectures. So go to the notes in modules and go down to the section Virtue Ethics. Go to the next point after that, many crafts and many ends. That's where we begin with the actual piece by Aristotle on page 55. So he starts out, those little squiggle lines, you see that little squiggle and then a 1, and then the beginning of the text, that means section. So I will refer to that, and when I use section whatever in your notes, that's what you look for, okay? So every craft and every line of inquiry, and likewise every action and decision, seems to seek some good. That is why some people were right to describe the good as what everything seeks. Section 2. But the ends that are sought appear to differ. Some are activities, others are products, etc., etc. And then go to section 3. Since there are many actions, crafts, and sciences, the ends turn out to be many as well. For health is the end of medicine, a boat of boat building, victory of generalship, etc. So what he's saying here is that anytime I do anything, I pick my nose, or I turn the page of the book, or I go to school, or I decide to have a family, or I get a new pair of glasses. It doesn't matter. Anything that I do in life, I'm doing it for some reason, right? I have an end goal in mind. So if I pick my nose, it's whatever the standard end goal is of picking one's nose. If I have a family, if I decide to have a family, people do that for all kinds of reasons. So it's whatever the end goal of having a family is in that situation. If I turn the page of the book, it's because I want to read something on the other page, right? So every action that I do has some end goal. So what he says is, it looks like then there are billions and billions and billions of ends. That is, things that we are seeking, things that are good. So picking my nose is good because whatever I get out of picking my nose, there's an itch in there, so it's relief. Okay, fine, and relief is good. That feels good. Turning the page, because I want to see what's written on this other page, is good because I need the information on the page. So there's something I get out of it. When I eat the McDonald's, as bad as it may be for me, I still get something out of it. It's greasy, it tastes good, whatever. There's some reason that I'm just hungry and it's right there, so it satiates my hunger. Even if I don't happen to like McDonald's that much. There's some reason that I do everything. I'm seeking something good by doing it. So he says, well, that suggests then that there are just tons and tons and tons of good things in the world. Tons of things that we want. This is pretty confusing because it looks like we seem in life to not just think that everything we find good is as good as everything else. And we seem to think that the goods that I get from eating McDonald's all day or watching TV all day are not the kinds of goods that I'm really, truly seeking in life. That doesn't seem to be what I'm really trying to get. In fact, those goods seem to be pretty empty. So he says, maybe there's one final good that makes everything else that is considered to be good, good and worth pursuing. Maybe all of those things are good because of one end that is the best good. So go down on that left-hand column on page 55, the new section, the highest good in political science, the very bottom. Suppose then that things achievable by action have some end goal that we wish for because of itself, and because of which we wish for the other things, and that we do not choose everything because of something else. For if we do, it will go on without limit, so that desire will prove to be empty and futile. Clearly, this end will be the good, that is to say, the best good. So what he's saying here is that, I want the McDonald's because I want the greasy pleasure that it affords. But I want the greasy pleasure because I'm actually in a depressed mood, so I'm sort of eating my pain, as it were. Well, I want to eat my pain, that is, get rid of my pain by distracting myself with bodily pleasures, because I don't like to feel pain, because I really do want to be happy. That's eating your pain is not a route to happiness. Like, it's not going to work. It's actually going to lead you the opposite direction, away from happiness. But we do that anyway. So when I turn the page to see the information on the other page, it's because I need the information for some project I'm doing. And why do I want to do the project? Because I want to do well in this class. Why do I care about doing well in the class? Because I want to get a degree. Why do I want to get a degree? Blah, 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 blah. Because I want to be happy. So it looks like there is some final end. I don't want to be happy because happiness gets me something even better than happiness, though. We know that already. It doesn't look like happiness is ever a means to an end. What is better than being truly, authentically happy? I don't know. It looks like everything else we want because eventually we think that it will lead us to happiness. And sometimes we're mistaken. The McDonald's is never going to lead anybody to happiness. But going to school may do that, if you do it correctly. So, but he makes this point here. We do not choose everything because of something else. For if we do, it will go on without limit. So that desire will prove to be empty and futile. So it's not that I want to do well in the project, to get the A in the class, to do well in school, to get the degree, to get the job, to get the house, to get the whatever, to get the whatever, to get the whatever, to get the whatever, on without end. If that is the way that it were, if there were no final end, most amazing and awesome good thing, then all of those other things would only matter they would only be valuable or good insofar as they get me the next thing. And the next thing is only valuable or good insofar as it gets me the next thing. But if there's no final end, then all of those goods, those things that I said were good, are actually meaningless. They're empty. They're not good at all. They don't ever get me anything that is good. They're only ever a means to an end. So if they're only a means to an end and never an end in themselves, and they don't lead to something that is an end in itself, then they have nothing in them that's actually any good. They're only helpful insofar as they get me to the next thing. But that's only helpful insofar as it gets me to the next thing. But I'm not going anywhere with any of those things. It just goes on and on forever, and I have no real end goal in life. That stinks. And philosophers for a long time have thought that that was a problematic idea. Okay? And Aristotle is certainly one of them. So he says, all right, it can't be that. I mean, that can't be the thing. It has to be that there's some final end. There's some wonderful thing for which we want everything else. All of those other things eventually will lead to this one final thing. And thus, everything else suddenly has meaning, at least insofar as it has the potential to lead to this one thing that is good in itself. So, all of the things I want, then, are meaningful. They're not empty if there is some final good. Okay? So, anyway, that's what I said there. Now, oh, did I already go over this? I feel like I already went over this in the other one, and I didn't watch it again, so, well, it doesn't matter, you don't need to know what political science is anyway. So if I went over political science in the last video, then you know it. If not, it's not going to kill you to not know it anyway, because it's not part of your paper topics. But let's go to the next thing. What is happiness? So this is on page 56, right-hand column. At the top there, it says common beliefs. So he says, if he figures out that this final and good thing is happiness. Okay, fine. We know that then. Section 2, under this new big section called Common Beliefs. As far as its name goes, most people virtually agree, for both the many and the majority of people and the cultivated people who are actually educated, call it happiness, and they suppose that living well and doing well are the same as being happy. So he says, okay, it looks like everybody pretty much agrees that the best good thing in the world, better than having a family, better than having knowledge, better than having a job, better than having money, better than having wisdom, better than having anything, is happiness. All of those things are good insofar as they have the potential, some of them, to get us happiness. But happiness is the thing that we want for itself alone, and we don't think that there's something better than happiness that we're going to get if we get happiness, that happiness will ever lead to anything better. So what he then in section 3 says for the so our next project then is to figure out what happiness is, and that's really what he sets out to do here in this text. And of course, for Aristotle, happiness for the human being has something to do with, funnily enough, ethics, since this is an ethics class, and this book by Aristotle is called the Nicomachean Ethics. It has something to do with ethics. Okay, so section 3, for the many, the majority of people think happiness, is something obvious and evident. For instance, pleasure, wealth, or honor. So this is the portion that I explain in my sample paper. It's about Aristotle and his arguments against pleasure, wealth, and honor as being happiness. So I'm not going to take everybody's time going through all of that. You should read my sample paper. I explain it, I think, pretty clearly, why he says that pleasure, wealth, and honor are not happiness. So once he knocks down what everybody else says happiness is, he goes on then to put forth his own idea of what it is. Now, at the bottom of page 57, the right-hand column, so the last full paragraph, you see a few lines in, it starts at section 3. Since there are apparently many ends, right? McDonald's, turning the page, picking my nose, and we choose some of them, for instance, wealth, flutes, and general instruments, because of something else. Remember, I don't want money for itself. It's not like I just want to sit there and stare at a bag of money. That's not my end goal by getting money. I want money so I can buy stuff with the money. It's not the money that's interesting. I don't just want to sit on money and look at it for the rest of my life. I want to buy new stuff with it. So the money is good to get stuff that actually has goodness about it. The money is merely a means to an end. Okay? I don't care about like the piece of paper. I willingly trade that away for the t-shirt, the new t-shirt, or whatever. So let's go back to this. Because of something else, it is clear that not all ends, end goals, things that we desire, are complete. But the best good is apparently something complete. And so, if only one end is complete, the good we are looking for will be this end. If more ends than one are complete, it will be the most complete of those. Section 4. We say that an end pursued in its own right is more complete than an end pursued because of something else, and that an end that is never choice-worthy because of something else is more complete than ends that are choice-worthy both in their own right and because of this end. Okay. What the hell is he talking about? Look at my notes. It's much easier. So, complete and incomplete ends. There is only one thing that is a complete end, and there are two kinds of things that are incomplete ends. So, first of all, a complete end is anything that we want for itself alone, not as a means to an end, but as an end in itself. That is a complete end. Anything that we want because it itself is awesome. We don't want it because it gets us something else that's awesome. We want it for it alone. The only thing that looks like it's a complete end, at least as far as Aristotle is concerned, is happiness. Some other philosophers since Aristotle, obviously, I mean, every philosopher has read and studied and worked deeply with Aristotle. I mean, you're not a philosopher if you haven't studied Aristotle. That just doesn't happen. And he's the only philosopher in the history of all philosophy who has been called just by this name, the philosopher. Aristotle is the philosopher. All of human history. So, you don't become a philosopher and no figurehead in philosophy after him. I mean, Hobbes knew Aristotle. Descartes knew Aristotle. They all know him. So you can be sure that they've grappled with what he's had to say. And some of them have said that there might be some alternatives, that happiness might be a complete good, but there might be some others. Some philosophers have suggested freedom. Freedom has the potential to be a complete good, but that's just something to think about. Do we want freedom only for itself alone, or do we want freedom? Does freedom lead to happiness? If it also leads to something else that's good, then it's an incomplete good. Even if we want it for itself alone, too. That's one type of the two incomplete goods. So some people have suggested that freedom, though, is choice-worthy only for itself, and it doesn't get us anything else that's better than it. And some other people have suggested knowledge. So just food for thought. I don't know what I think about knowledge and freedom necessarily. I think you might be right about happiness. I want happiness too. I don't seem to want happiness in order to get something else that seems even better than happiness. I'm not sure what is better than happiness. I don't think there is anything. So, I think he's right at least about that. But there's the potential that there are other complete ends besides happiness. But that doesn't mean that he's wrong about happiness, by the way. So then there are the two kinds of incomplete ends, an end pursued for something else. So money is the first kind, the most incomplete end. It is only pursued for something else. I don't just want stacks of money for the sake of having those stacks of objects. I don't want the paper for the sake of having the paper. The way I want, I don't have anything around me, the dress for the sake of having the dress. I mean, I want the dress not because it gets me something else, but because I want to wear the dress, right? So I want the money to get the dress. I don't want the money for itself, though, in any way. I want to get rid of the money and buy stuff for myself, right? Or experiences or something. So money is totally an incomplete end. It's the lowest of all end goals because it's only good for something else. Then there's something like health, which is usually how the Greeks describe the second kind of incomplete end. So this kind of incomplete end is wanted, it's desired for itself and because it gets us something else. So I want health because it gets me potentially a longer life. But I also, or if I'm healthy, it will allow me the energy to play with my grandchildren or something, or whatever, okay? But it gets me, being healthy affords me the opportunities to do other fun things. But health is also good in itself, okay? So it's desired just for itself alone, even if I don't have the opportunity to do anything with it, as it were. So those are the two kinds of incomplete ends. Now, as he says, in section 5, now happiness, more than anything else, seems complete without qualification. So here's where he says that happiness is the only complete end. Okay? Now, go down to the bottom of the left-hand column, page 58. Section 9, the very, very last paragraph. But presumably the remark that the best good is happiness is apparently something generally agreed. We still need a clearer statement of what that best good is. So he's saying, okay, so we know that the best good thing is happiness. The only complete end is happiness. It's the most amazing thing in the world. And we know that happiness is not pleasure, wealth, or honor. So what is it then? We still haven't figured out what that means. So, section 10, right after that. Perhaps then we shall find this if we first grasp the function of a human being. For just as the good, that is, the doing well for a flautist, that is, someone who plays the flute, a sculptor, and every craftsman, and in general for whatever has a function and characteristic action, seems to depend on its function. The same seems to be true for a human being if a human being has some function. So he says, okay, so happiness is the best good thing. We're trying to define what happiness is. So we have to figure out what any good thing is. So a good flautist, a good musician who plays the flute, will, I guess by definition, if you say he's a really good musician of the flute, that will mean that he plays the flute really well. He's a really good sculptor. That will mean that he sculpts really well. That's a really good knife. It will mean that it cuts really well. So whenever we say that something is good, that means it performs its characteristic function well. Not just kind of or almost or poorly. Then it's not a good knife is not one that cuts poorly. That's not a good knife. That's a bad knife. A good knife is one that cuts cleanly and doesn't squash the bread and all that. That's a good knife. A good flute player is one who doesn't just play the flute, one who doesn't just dabble in the flute, one who plays the flute poorly, but one who plays the flute well. So a good person is one who performs the function of a person well. So, of course, the next question is, well, what is the function of a person, right? Let me go down here. Okay. So go to section 12. What then could this be, this function of a person? For living is apparently shared with plants. But what we are looking for is the special function of a human being. So it can't be that my body grows. Because, by the way, I could be in a coma. You know, in a coma, I mean, people could be in comas for years. Their bodies still grow. Doesn't seem to me, though, that really qualifies as fulfilling the function of a person. If you're not even conscious, I'm not sure that you're in any way doing something you're supposed to be doing. Like, you're put on this earth to be in a coma, and that's enough. That's weird. Okay, so that's not it. It's not just that our bodies are able to grow. And that's not special to us. Plants grow, animals grow, bacteria, everything living grows. We're looking for something special about us. So it can't be bodily growth and nutrition. Hence, we should set aside the life of nutrition and growth. The life next in order is some sort of life of sense perception. So seeing and feeling emotions, suffering, pains, which, by the way, animals do. And they can suffer quite a bit. And that's important for moral awareness. Because there are other creatures on this planet, too, that feel pain, emotional and physical. And we might just have duties to them as well as human beings. But this, too, is apparently shared with horse, ox, and every animal. You know, I noticed that even Aristotle was able to understand that animals feel pain. Yeah. It was a long time ago. Maybe we should consider what we think. Put that up for some moral consideration. So section 13, the remaining possibility then is some sort of life of action of the part of the soul that has reason. Go down, 3 more lines. Moreover, life is also spoken of in 2 ways, as capacity and as activity. And we must take a human being's special function to be life as activity, since this seems to be called life more fully. So, where did I wrote this in here, section 13, the human function, is activity of the soul in accord with virtue, which is what he'll say at the bottom of that page. So, it's activity of the rational soul. What he means here is that you use your reason to think about stuff. That you don't just go blindly, mom says, the church says, government says, I'm not going to question anything. I know I have a brain and the ability to reason, but I'm not going to use any of that. I'm just going to blindly follow, like sheep, what everybody tells me. You, then, are not performing your human function. You have the capacity to be rational. If you only maintain the capacity, but you never act on it, that is, you aren't actively rational. You don't critique what people tell you. You don't think through it for yourself. You just blindly follow. You are not fulfilling your human function. The function of a human being, what is special about human beings, is that we have the ability to be rational, to question, to doubt, and to try to improve by questioning, critiquing. If you're not doing that, you are wasting your life. What else are you supposed to be doing but using your brain? I'm not sure. So, first off, as I've said, we have capacity and activity. A person who acts on, that is, who actually uses his reason and virtue, is a much better person than one who merely has the capacity but never acts on it. I'm not impressed with somebody who has the capacity to be rational and moral, but chooses to just sit there in front of the TV all day and not do anything, that doesn't, no, that's not the kind of person for whom I have respect, the kind of person I want to be like, the kind of person we're taught or that we even think we should be like. This isn't a successful person, an interesting person, a flourishing person. This is a person who's wasting his potential. And we think that that's a shame. And there's a reason why. Because he has the opportunity to do something extraordinary in the world. And by that I mean, just being a good person is extraordinary. Because most of us, most of the time, are not that good of people. Most of the time, we're rash and vain and, angry and cruel and irritable and all kinds of things. And, well, that's not really being a good person. So being a moral, good person who actively tries to be patient and forgiving and compassionate, things like that, that's difficult. That's challenging. And it requires that we think through our responses to events before we respond. And most of the time we don't do that. We just lash back or react. Well, as much as I like animals, and I do very much, that's what animals do. And they don't have the opportunity to think through their behavior and decide, how is this going to affect this other person? This person I love or this stranger? I mean, how does it affect others? Is it right to do that to someone, a stranger or someone I love? Is it a good idea? How will I feel after I do that? Will I be racked with guilt? I think that animals are extraordinary and wonderful things, but no, I know they can't do that. And if I have that capacity, but I never bother to act on it or try to hone it a little bit, I don't think that as a person I will ever be extraordinary. There are plenty of people who have done important things. They've invented something or they've discovered something, but they're terrible human beings who actively seek to hurt others. And as nice as it is that somebody discovered something or invented something, I think a greater feat is to overcome yourself. And to die being able to say that you gave love and kindness. And by the way, those things aren't mutually exclusive. You can discover things and invent things and still work to be a good person. But when we use that phrase, a good person, we do mean what Aristotle means. We don't mean, well, he's a really good person because, he's slaughtered 1 million people, but he created this wonderful device. That's not what, Adolf Hitler was the one who created the Volkswagen, and that's really nice. He did, as far as the actual Germans were concerned, he did some wonderful things. So minus the mass genocide and, maniacal psychosis, in terms of helping the people, the citizens of his country, he did some really wonderful things there. And, that's very nice. But I don't think that makes him a good person. I'm glad he invented the Volkswagen as the car for the folk, right? The I mean, like the middle class that everybody could afford. And that's a wonderful thing. And I appreciate that kind of value, to try to take care of people who are, not just the elite and the wealthy and the upper class, but to try to take care of all of your citizens. I appreciate that in a government, but I don't think that makes him a good person just because he did that. In fact, I think that despite that, he's a very, very bad person. That he did not use his reason to improve his virtue, his moral awareness. Clearly he didn't. So think of the phrase, good person. We mean a moral person when we say that. We don't mean someone who's invented something. They could do that too, but that is not the necessary condition for someone to be a good person. The necessary condition is that they are morally praiseworthy. So keep that kind of thing in mind when you're thinking about this. So that's why he says, so even if you don't do anything bad, if you just abstain from action at all, you just maintain this capacity, but you don't use it at all in any way, for good or ill, you are also not a good person. You are a bad person, like a bad knife that doesn't do its job properly. It doesn't fulfill its function. That's a bad knife. A bad person is also one who doesn't fulfill his function. So you have to actually act on the capacity to do good things. You have to try to make yourself a better person and to go out in the world and do virtuous things. Now, just keep in mind, whenever I give examples of virtue, I say things like compassion, patience, forgiveness. It's not like Aristotle would have said that those are like evil things. I mean, certainly he wouldn't have said that, and he didn't. But those aren't Greek virtues as such. I'm born in this country. I'm Christianized. I'm not a Christian, but I am Christianized. So I've been assimilated into our moral system, which is a Christian moral system. So it's based on compassion. Be nice to meet some people who actually illustrated that virtue in this country that's supposed to be based on compassion. Yeah. We sure don't seem to base a lot of our political or social policies on a compassionate outlook. So it goes. But Aristotle would have said that the highest virtues are temperance, which is moderation, all things in moderation, wisdom, courage, justice. He thought very highly of friendship, loyalty, faithfulness in that way, just general human dignity, things like that. And we certainly share all of those feelings. I mean, now, today, we share those, we actively pursue those as virtues. But the highest is handed to us by Jesus. And it is compassion for those less fortunate. And not all less fortunate people are out to cheat the system. So. What did Jesus say? What is it? The line about fitting a camel through a needle's eye. as difficult as finding a good man. Compassion for those less fortunate. Sometimes it seems like in this country that that is something that people just don't pursue, or maybe not people, but maybe our structure of government. Not sure. A lot of hard-heartedness. I like what Jesus says about Lazarus. But I'm not a Christian. I'm a student of all theology, and I appreciate the theology of Jesus very much. He was a wonderful, wonderful man. I don't always like the church, but I like the man. And the parable of Lazarus and the wealthy man. And the wealthy man goes to hell, and he says to Lazarus, Lazarus not being wealthy, he says to Lazarus, please, just bring me a drop of water. It's just so hot. Just a drop of water. Have mercy on me. And Lazarus says, I don't have a problem doing that, but the gulf between us is so extreme that I can't reach you anymore. I don't know. 50 million people are without health care in this country. They're not all cheating the system, It's not possible. There should be no gulf between us. $2,000 years ago. People saw this problem. And for all those who thump the Bible, they don't seem to be any kinder for it. It's a shame. It's a great shame. I suppose Aristotle would have to say that we are not acting very well on our moral capacities. We're not fulfilling our function as human beings, and